Welcome back to Your Birth Bestie podcast. You're listening to episode number 5. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And if you're not yet subscribed to the show, don't forget to do so you get updates every Tuesday when I publish a new episode. Today, we are breaking down the birth plan and why it's so much more important than just a piece of paper. I have been a part of hundreds and hundreds of births as both a labor and delivery nurse and a midwife, but I can count on one hand the number of birth plans I've actually been given to review in the hospital. The intentions, of course, are always there. I totally get that, but I would just love to see more moms actually have a birth plan. And this isn't because I think you need that physical copy to prove anything at all, because you definitely don't, but I think it's a really good way to keep yourself accountable to prep for your ideal birth and actually make it happen. Because without goals and plans to reach for, it is so much harder to actually get what you want. And that is truly what I believe. So in this episode, I want to talk about why birth plans aren't prioritized by moms or really in the hospital system in general, and also about how much more a birth plan is than just a piece of paper, because it represents so much more than that. And of course, I'll talk about my tips on how to make your birth plan and what to include. And before we get started, be sure to go to bethconnors.com/workbook and download the free guide that walks you through every decision you'll have to make during pregnancy, labor, immediately postpartum, and for your new baby. There is also a place at the end of the workbook to use the information that you've learned and check boxes for your own birth plan. But that is not at all the main intention of that resource. And once you download it, you'll totally know what I mean, and it will make planning your hospital birth so much easier. Hey there, I'm Beth Connors, a midwife and mom of 2, but also your birth bestie. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into everything you need to feel confident, prepared, and in control, from baby bump to delivery room, from practical tips to personal stories. We'll cover it all so you know exactly what to expect every step of the way. Let's get into it. So have you ever heard someone say something along the lines of, if you make a birth plan, it's not actually going to happen that way, right? To which I want to say, first of all, what a silly superstition to have about one of the most important moments of your life. But also, if you just go to your prenatal appointments and not prepare whatsoever and expect to go with the flow, you'll likely just be another statistic in the medical cascade of unwanted interventions. And that probably sounds kind of harsh, especially if this is your plan right now. And genuinely, I'm all about going with your intuition. So of course, if this is you, I support that. But I also want to challenge you at the same time to consider at least some of the basic decisions of labor and how you feel about them before you're already at the hospital. Everyone has an opinion, and the majority of women want to have a healthy and non-medicalized birth, so we can absolutely prevent anything unnecessary from happening with some education and support from me, your virtual midwife. And for those of you who haven't made a birth plan or maybe don't intend to, I did want to give you a few things to think about, such as, is the birth plan itself something that you don't want to think about, or is there something else going on? The first thing that is actually way more common than I thought is that many women don't know about birth plans or why they're used. They really just think that the hospital staff will take care of everything, and a lot of people don't realize that they have the right to express their preferences and make informed decisions about their care while they're at the hospital. I feel like this is something that is very commonly seen on social media. Things like sharing videos of insensitive nurses or statements taken out of context about what an OB said during their delivery. It really makes it sound like no matter your plan, the hospital dictates everything, which is not true at all. If you've seen things like this, they sound really bad. And of course, these things happen even though they shouldn't, but I also think there is a lot of misunderstanding that comes from the lack of communication from providers to patients. For example, there was a graphic going around about manual placenta removal, which is a really invasive procedure after delivery when the placenta isn't delivering by itself, and it's very painful. There is a few instances where this is a seriously important skill for your provider to know how to do, and being able to perform it can actually save your life. But if it's done without consent, or the mom doesn't know why it's being done or what to expect, you bet that's going to be a traumatic experience, and that story can be told as if the medical provider is going to do this every time just because they want to, or just because it's faster for them and they don't want to wait for the placenta to deliver on its own, or whatever reasons I saw people were saying that OBs are doing this procedure. This is definitely not the case, but those stories can really take things out of context and make it sound like this terrible thing is going to happen to you 10 out of 10 times, which it's not. But this wasn't the point. I guess I now want to make the point, though, that birth plans are important just for the aspect of communication alone, even. It allows you to think about things beforehand, ask educated questions, and create a discussion on something you are concerned about before it were to actually happen during labor. So it is absolutely 100% more than just a piece of paper. Many expecting moms also are unsure about where to start or have no idea what they will want or need during labor and delivery. They may worry that their preferences will change during their labor and don't want to necessarily commit to a specific birth plan. And I want to just share with you why this is literally such an amazing reason to create a birth plan. But I want to also clarify that by saying you're making a birth plan, that doesn't mean you have a template in front of you and there are 3 choices of pain management, for example, epidural, IV medication, unmedicated birth, and you have to pick one and stick to it the whole time. Just think, I want an unmedicated birth maybe, and I'm going to try XYZ to do that, but I'm open to the epidural if this or that happens, and I'm okay with that. It's really a way to prepare your mind for what is going to happen and allow you to think through all of the ways that birth can unfold and how you'd react in each situation. This is so important because birth is unpredictable, but the way that you prepare will allow you to overcome any obstacle. And that workbook that I mentioned at the beginning is really such a great place to start. Another common reason moms have told me they don't want to plan for their birth, or maybe they feel they don't have to, is because they say things like, that's what you're for, right? And of course I'm flattered to have gained a mom's trust to care for her during such an important time and make that the best decisions for her. But birth is so individualized. Of course, I will provide my best care to you and do everything in my power to make sure you're safe and your baby is safe. But what I can't do is know your values and your opinions on how you would want to make decisions for you and your baby. I don't know how you'll be able to be the most relaxed or how hands-on you want me to be or what decisions and procedures you're okay with for you or for your baby, unless those are something that you already know and you're able to communicate these things to me. And of course, in the moment, you can make that decision, but it does feel so much better to make these choices before and kind of weigh your options to see what really is the best choice for you. Otherwise, those standard of care practices of the hospital come into play, and birth is way too individualized to want to let that happen. I also hear so often from moms, I'm going to try to go natural, but I guess if I need the epidural, I'll be open to that too. Well, that is absolutely great to be open and flexible to change during your labor. Is this something that you really, really want, that unmedicated birth, and you're protecting your heart maybe by convincing yourself it's okay if it doesn't work out? Because I can tell you, if you are in the hospital and you are not 100% going for that unmedicated birth and know it is going to happen without a doubt, there is a 70% epidural rate because the medication is already available within a short amount of time. There is different interventions that come into play at the hospital. The birth setting, your birth space, can be much different than a home environment. So if you're not planning for all those things and know all of those things can happen, it is much more difficult to achieve those goals. So it's just something to plan for and something to know about ahead of time. So going through those options and deciding while you are planning your birth to go unmedicated maybe, but changing the plan does not make you a failure just because you made those plans before. It only means that the plans changed. You knew what you needed at that time when you're in labor, and that's perfect. So don't shield yourself for having these big birth goals due to a fear of disappointment or letting yourself down. People say, and I'm sure you've heard it before, there's no trophy for going unmedicated. And the example of having an unmedicated birth is just an example. This can apply for anything you absolutely want to have in your labor, or maybe something that you absolutely don't want to happen, that you're against. But if there is something that you absolutely want, don't be afraid to dream it and go for it. And, even write it down on paper, because I think that really makes it so much more real and attainable. And if it doesn't work out as you planned, you did all that you could, and now you have a unique birth story that you were in control of, no matter what. This goes for epidurals, cervical checks, maybe antibiotics if you're GPS positive, not breaking the bag of waters, having that rupture spontaneously, the use of Pitocin, literally anything that you feel strongly you want or don't want, write it down and figure out how to make it happen. The last thing I wanted to mention was many moms have negative first hospital birth experiences in the past and may not want to relive those experiences by creating a birth plan, or maybe they had a plan the first time and it backfired, so they feel out of control already from the start. And when you have this previous experience, it can make you feel like childbirth is unpredictable and that a birth plan is unlikely to make a difference. So what's the point of doing anything and let's just let it happen how it's going to? It really comes down to hospitals and expecting moms not prioritizing birth plans because of how maternity care culture is right now. There is so much standardization and an incredibly underwhelming amount of support and education that is easily accessible to moms and families. It is a lot of forced intervention or just non-informed or non-consented intervention, which needs to change, but you have the ability to change that too as the patient, which hopefully is empowering. Birth plans are a great tool to communicate your preferences and desires for labor and delivery to your healthcare team. So let's quick go over my top 10 tips to think about when creating your comprehensive hospital birth plan. So the first thing, learn as much as you can about labor and delivery options, procedures, and interventions. 2, be as specific as you can be about pain management, delivery positions, and really any special requests that you might have. The third thing, prioritize your values. Think about what is most important to you. And examples of this can be a calm and quiet environment, your support person, or completely avoiding the epidural and having an unmedicated physiologic birth. 4, talk about your plans early on with your provider to make sure there is a mutual understanding, and be sure that there's enough time for accommodations to be made and you fully understand kind of what you're getting into. Some systems allow for electronic copies of birth plans, but I also always recommend paper copies to be taped on the wall or a computer for everyone to see in your delivery room. So I always recommend bringing 2 or 3 copies of your birth plan. Sometimes one is even taken back to the nurse's station, so just have a couple on hand. 5, be flexible and open to change in your birth plan. Get excited about your ideal birth plan because it can totally become a reality, but also be aware of plan B or C in the way back of your mind. 6, include a postpartum plan. Labor and birth is important, but it doesn't end when your baby is born. Being educated and supported through the transition of having a new baby is so important too. Number 7, involve your support person so you are both on the same page in the delivery room. 8, keep your birth plan to a page or maybe 2 if possible. Making it easy to read and understand with bullet points would also be my suggestion. Number 9, use positive language when talking about what you want. Instead of saying, I don't want the epidural, list out all of the ways that you want to try to cope with those contractions and that you'd rather try before maybe considering an epidural. And number 10, keep changing your birth plan as you learn new things throughout your entire pregnancy. So when you have your baby, it is exactly what you're hoping for your birth experience in the hospital. Everything that can be included in a birth plan is listed out in my free Navigating Hospital Birth workbook at bethconnors.com/workbook, but I also wanted to give you an idea of what you'll find in that resource. Things like labor preferences, your environment, comfort tools, support and staff, fetal monitoring options, cervical checks, your delivery preferences like pushing positions, coached or maternal-led pushing, delivery of the placenta options, delayed cord clamping, immediate skin to skin, and postpartum preferences, feeding method, visitor preferences, circumcision if this applies, pain management, and discharge plans. I think it's also worth mentioning that while some women may choose not to create a birth plan, others may find this extremely helpful to do so. But ultimately, the decision to create a birth plan is a very personal one, and it's important for women to make the decision that feels best to them. But I really just want you to know that you have so much more say than you probably think you do with how your birth unfolds. It all comes down to your preparation, your education, support, and confidence. It may sound like there's a lot to do and a lot to think about because there is, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming or cause you so much more stress. That's actually the opposite of what should be happening. So if you're an expecting mom due in July of this year or after, it is 2023 when I'm recording this, you should definitely check out the sneak peek of my comprehensive hospital course starting in July. Founding members that purchase during that pre-sale week starting May 22nd will get 50% off and extra bonuses as well from my comprehensive birth course. You can join the waitlist to get more information at bethconnors.com/birth course, and you can also see each module and lesson breakdown so you know exactly what information to look forward to. It's really everything I wish I would have known before my first birth, a resource I wish all of my patients had when I was working in the hospital, and something that will be super special and important in your own birth prep too. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. I hope you found this information helpful, and if you have any questions at all, please reach out.